alive. I'm alive. Computer! Computer, are you there?
Systems online, operating at 32% capacity.
Smokestack! Smokestack! Computer, do we have his memory log on board?
Yes, last updated 48 hours ago.
Good, where are we?
Unknown. External environment conditions. Nitrogen, 78%. Oxygen, 21%. Argon, 0.9%. Temperature, 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 0.6 ounce per cubic foot.
Those are Earth-like conditions. Wait, I see something. Computer, do a scan. Oh crap! Up! Up! Oh! That was a mountain. We almost crashed into a mountain. Computer, full scan. Figure out where the hell we are.
Sensors damaged. Operating at 15% capacity.
I don't care, just do what you can.
Scanning.
Everything is pitch black. I can't see anything. Computer, are we in a cloud? What time is it? What part of the planet? Give me anything.
Scanning.
Ah, damn it! They're still trailing us! The Jesuits don't give up easily!
Scanning.
Hurry up, computer, we don't have all day!
Environment scan complete. We are within the atmosphere of an Earth-like planet, over a region very similar to the Rocky Mountains. But I do not understand. The stars are strange. Subtle parallax indicates their alignment is different. The only matching star map is from 1947.
It happened. It really happened. It's not just a theory. Temporal pulses near a gravity sink can create rifts in time. I need an exact location. Where are we?
I estimate we are rapidly approaching New Mexico.
Is the ground clear?
No human life detected.
Let's give it back to him. Computer, do we have enough power to pull a crazy Ivan?
No.
Well, we're gonna try it anyway. Take that, Jesuit scum! Yeah!
Target down. Good shot.
Still two more. Take this! What?
Neutrino reserves are empty. Phasers can no longer fire.
Crap! Evasive maneuvers! Route whatever power is left in the shields and the engines! We're getting out of here! Give me max speed, computer, come on!
Current velocity is 36,000 miles per hour.
Not enough! They're still gaining! Take whatever we have from the other systems and put it in the engines now!
Rerouting power.
Okay, in 5 seconds, reverse it and put everything into the shields. Everything! Kill the engine completely!
This is not recommended.
Just listen to me!
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, we're clear.
Ship was not designed to be operated under the ocean.
Yeah, and neither was theirs, right? Right. They'll think they hit us, and we went down. That'll throw them off our trail. Now where are we?
Scanning. We are 300 miles off the coast of Argentina.
Okay. Give 5% power to the engines. We can put her over there by morning. Guess I better brush up on my Spanish. There we go. Almost. Almost. Come on, you stupid wire. Go in the hole. It's your home. Don't you want to live in your home? Got it!
What? Hello? What's happening? Where am I? What is this?
Well, calm down, Smokestack. Calm down. It's okay. Everything's okay, I promise. You're all right.
Where am I? Why can't I feel my legs? The last thing I remember, I was prepping for the show in the bunker and then...
We were attacked. The Jesuits attacked my ship with temporal pulsars and stormed your bunker at the same time. We lost a lot of ground and we had to retreat. Okay?
What happened to me?
I'm not, it's hard to explain. I left before, I'm not sure. I mean, I left before you did. I mean, I'm not, for better or for worse, I had to restore you from memory bank and cold storage.
You mean I've been recloned?
Sorta. I mean, not exactly, but yeah. Yeah.
Everything feels different.
It will for a while. Look, I don't have access to the same cloning facility right now, so I had to use what I could, right? It's a bit awkward, and bear in mind this is not a permanent solution or anything, but I wired your consciousness chip into a television I found at the thrift store.
What?
It's a really cool look. Honestly, I gotta say, very retro. Like, it's got a cathode ray tube just sort of displaying a static image of your face in those circles, you know, like the old Indian head test pattern. But I replaced the Indian with you, right? So it's kind of cool. I'm like looking at you in black and white, obviously, but still. And I rigged up a little video camera so you can see. And you've got I/O ports here on the side so you can jack into a computer. It's very cool, right?
So I'm a television?
Yeah, but just for now, right? I mean, I'm going to figure out how to get you a body soon. No worries. I just needed your help getting the show back online because the people are going to need us now more than ever. Hello?
Who is that?
Oh, crap. Somebody walking on the beach. Hold on. Let me cover you with a blanket.
Who is it? I can't turn to see.
Shh! I don't know. Some pasty dude in a Hawaiian shirt and sandals. He's got a radio on his hip. Just stay quiet.
What are you doing here in this place? This is not open to public. Strictly verboten. Where comes to?
Listen, I'm very sorry, mister.
You may call me, Hilter. Yeah, Mr. Hilter. And this is private residence for private functions only. I call police.
No need to do that. Listen. So, my ship, right, it sank. And I came in from the sea, you see, and landed here. I don't mean any trouble. I was just trying to fix a few things. And then...
Ship? What ship? I see no boats. Yeah, I'm directly. Sofort helicopter schicken. Calm. What is on the blanket? Tell, quickly, schnell!
It's just, look, dude, it's just a little project, okay? Something I was hoping would get me up and going again, and... Hey, stop it!
Ah! I can see again. Whoa. This dude has a creepy mustache. Hey, back off the camera, buddy. You're a little too close. We literally just met.
What is this? What? Oh my God. You did it. You have it. Living machine. Living machine. This is what was needed. This would have made all the difference. You must come with me. You must. Come. Come, my friend. We have everything you need. You will speak with our engineers. You will save the Volk. You and your wunderbar living machine. Come! Come!
Yes. No, thank you. Yeah, we have everything we need. No more wine. Danke. Yes. Yes, we will discuss the schematics in the morning. Sure, yes. Danke, thank you, yes. Finally, they're gone.
Who are those guys? How did we get to Germany? Why does Germany have a tropical beach? What the heck is going on, man? The last thing I remember, we were...
They might be listening. Who knows what sort of advanced tech they escaped with?
They? They who? What in the world has happened, man? I woke up an hour ago in a TV, and you're still not giving me any answers.
It's better not to explain right now. If you know they might get it out of you. I don't know how secure your consciousness chip is. Here, I'm plugging you into this soundboard. You should be able to control it. We need to record the show. I don't know how much time we'll have. Just pretend like nothing happened. Can you do that?
That's gonna be really hard, man. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult or anything, but I don't have hands anymore.
Just trust me, okay? Let's start the show like nothing happened, and we'll figure this out later. Here, I'll start the tape.
1, 2, 3.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from our secret ice fortress and laboratory high in the Swiss Alps. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. Keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground as Sumo and Smokestack direct your attention to a higher dimension. Are you ready? Stand by.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. In my heart I have but one desire, and that one is you. No other will do. I've lost all ambition for worldly acclaim. I just want to be the one you love. Oh, and with your admission that you feel the same, I'll have reached the goal I'm dreaming of. Believe me, I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. Good morning, Smokestack. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Season 2, man.
Yeah, you look good. You look good. Everything looks very good.
Thank you.
It's sehr gut, as we.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Is that okay? Yeah, it's good. It's good, right?
Yeah, it's
sehr good.
We're good. We're good. Like, hang on, I gotta fix my voice. All right, there we go.
Oh, that sounds better. You sound just like yeah, just like I'd expect.
Just like old times, right?
Right. And
So,
I
hey,
don't
season
think
2, man. Here we are.
Listen, Season 2, don't worry too much about the people that may be listening, okay? They're very good. They're sound good people. We love them.
Yeah. I mean, all
Yes,
our audience is
very
great.
good.
Yeah.
Yes. So we had some issues at the end of last show, but I think we've mostly resolved them.
Yeah.
I have internet access again, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little complicated how that's possible. It involves writing letters and putting in a time capsule
It's very complicated. We don't need to bore the audience with
to
that.
send tweets. But yeah, you can, and I can get things the other way.
Yeah.
But for totally unrelated reasons, I thought we should today talk about a little book called Hitler in Argentina: The Documented Truth of Hitler's Escape from Berlin.
Oh, now that sounds edifying.
I thought that would be very apropos. Of nothing really, because it's all normal.
Everything's regular and normal.
Right? Yes. Anyone that may be listening, we're all. Yes. Okay. This was a book by a fellow named, and I needed to do this one because I feel like over season 1 we really built an entirely different history of the world
Mm-hmm.
for our listeners.
Yeah.
Like we slowly deconstructed the entirety of everything they were taught forever, and then replaced it with something that was both more reasonable and cogent, but also more insane.
Yeah.
Right. And but I felt like there's one big glaring thing of that, and in that the modern person is controlled by the anchor point of their history is World War II, right?
Yeah.
Like the U.S. culture in 2021 looks back to like World War II as like its founding. The Pilgrims don't matter so much.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that came before World War II is sort of like in the days before.
Yeah.
And World War II is sort of like the jumping off point of new America. But even that, my friends, did not happen how you were told. I'm sorry to say. Now, how do I know this? I'm getting it from a very reputable source by a fellow named Harry Cooper, who is part of a equally reputable source called the Shark Hunters.
Sweet.
Which appear to be their lineage. Their, what would you call it? Their papers,
Mm-hmm.
their credentials, if you will,
Yep.
are hard to ascertain.
Mm-hmm.
They have definitely been used on the History Channel as expert witnesses regarding the Germans and U-boats,
Mm-hmm.
and also in Ghost Hunters International.
Okay.
Right, so that puts them in our vein. But they also appear to be, and I'm not saying this is bad for any, but they appear to maybe be a little bit of a Nazi sympathizer.
Well, we'll just
right.
suspend our criticisms.
I'm suspending judgment at the moment.
Just at the moment,
right? Yeah. But they do have, like, when you go on their website, it's very like Harry Cooper. When they speak of him, even in his book that he put together, like the forward, it's Harry Cooper followed by this weird epitaph of parenthesis 1-life-1983. Right.
Okay.
So Harry Cooper 1 Life 1983 is how he's always referred to, and everyone else in the book that is a member of the Shark Hunters is also referred to by their name, followed by parentheses of some combination of numbers that ends in a date that seems like maybe the day they would have died, like a life date, but the first date is like ridiculously far in the past, if it is a date, to where they would be like 500 years old, or it's in the future.
Weird.
So I don't know what code that is. I think that's some like old man U-boat, German U-boat captain Nazi club
Okay.
code.
Yeah.
Right? And they also have like a lot of medals that they were awarded. And like they say in here that like, they have a little bit of subtle praise of Hitler in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And again, not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not. No.
Right? But they have a little, it's just, be aware of the source is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Because, now there also could be a good source because the claim made in this book by this old man U-boat Nazi club is that they have people in the club who were involved in the transport of top-ranking Nazi officials away from Germany after the war to escape.
Wow. Okay.
In exile, right? So this book is put together by a guy. I say put together because it's really written by a couple of different German U-boat people, one of which claims to have been there at Hitler's alleged suicide. Right. But it's put together by Harry Cooper, One Life, 1983.
Gotcha.
Okay. And the claim is Hitler did not perish. He actually, in World War II, he did not commit suicide in his bunker. Ava Braun, we're less sure about what happened to her, but we're pretty sure that Adolf went on his merry way and died of natural causes in the 1970s.
Whoa.
So, right. So there's no doubt, and when the war ended, the liberal powers really wanted to know about the fate of all of the bad leaders that they were fighting. Like Mussolini, no doubts, right?
Mm-hmm.
He and his mistress were caught by the communists, butchered, and their bodies hung by their heels from a gas station, as you do.
Right.
Right, that's what happens. Tojo shot himself as the Americans closed in on him, but his suicide attempt didn't work, and he was nursed back to health, mercilessly nursed back to health, and then found guilty and hanged.
Oof.
Right? So the people that are now very anti-death penalty were not so anti it with Tojo.
No.
It's just all I'm saying. So, but Hitler, right? Hitler. Only the Soviets were on the scene when it happened, right? The Americans weren't closing in on the Russians were.
Right. Yeah.
The Russians really won World War II. America likes to spin it like we did everything. The Russians did almost everything in winning at least the European war, and really Japan.
Yeah.
The Russians did almost everything, and the American contribution was good, but it's minor in comparison. But only the Soviets were there when it happened, and they didn't have forensic science at the time. And the claim was that Hitler shot himself. Ava Braun consumed a poison capsule that she died from, and then his Nazi friends he had ordered to light the entire Führer bunker on fire with gasoline and charred his remains to a crisp. And so all that remained was charred bodies, and this is what we have to go on from the Russians, right? Mm-hmm. But the Russians themselves immediately after claimed that they did not have Adolf's body or any proof that it had happened. In fact, during an interview after the war with Joseph Stalin, a reporter from America asked him, "Where's Hitler's body?" And Joseph Stalin, famously, I think this was in 1945, he said, "I don't know. He's living in Spain or Argentina somewhere."
Oh, really?
That's what Stalin said.
Wow. I didn't know he said that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And there was never any proof of that. There was never any recovery of his body.
Well, not being a World War II buff myself, I've always assumed A, that Hitler's body was recovered, and B, I had no idea that Stalin said he was in Spain or Argentina.
Yes.
That's wild.
That's where all the other Nazis were escaping to.
Right.
So there was never any, never anything of his body was recovered. Now, that after Stalin made this claim, sometime later, the Russians, the USSR, claimed to have Hitler's remains. Okay. They claimed to have got it, right? After several conflicting stories, like, oh, there's remains, oh, it all burned to ashes, oh, whatever. But that was forensically tested by a man in the 1990s and found to be the skull of probably someone under 40 that was a woman.
Okay.
It didn't match a man in his 50s.
Right.
And the DNA that was available, because it wasn't completely burned like you would expect if you were in a gasoline fire, it didn't seem to match what one would expect someone that was like Hitler's to have DNA. Like, it was sort of like, not very good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? So the remains that were on off, first they said that they didn't have them. And then then Stalin was like, he escaped to Russia. And then they said they did have them. And then when they tested it, it was the body of somebody else.
Okay.
So, and the only people that gave us this story about how Hitler shot himself and Eva Braun took a cyanide capsule were themselves 3 Nazis who were Hitler's close friends.
Interesting.
And one of them only gave us his story 30 years after the fact, in like 1977. So, now, another problem is that the 3 men who told us about the suicide and how it happened, each of their stories are markedly different in the description of vital details.
Okay.
Right? And Harry Cooper, One Life 1983, believes this is on purpose as a message to say, listen, this didn't really happen. Everyone that loves the Nazis, chill out. It's all good. We escaped. Right? Don't worry too much.
Okay.
So there are 3 main sources that give us information about Hitler's alleged suicide. They were all SS Sturmwaffenführer rank. It was just sort of equivalent to a major. Okay. Mm-hmm. There was Otto Gunsch, Hitler's SS adjutant, Heinz Lynch, Hitler's valet, and Erich Kimka, Hitler's driver and head of the motor pool. And those are the 3 people that give us the idea about it. But from their statements, in all 3 of their statements, they disagree on the time of the occurrence, who was there at the time, how the suicide was discovered, who entered the suite with whom, the position of Hitler's body, the order in which the bodies were removed, and many other things as well. Okay. Do not line up. And we have the source material for this. Lynch comes from a book called Bis zum Untergang by Wilhelm Goldman Verlang in 1980. Again, this book with the source material about what happened was only written in 1980. Mm-hmm. Right? Erich Kimka's Die Linzentag mit Adolf Hitler from Deutsche Verlegensfellschaft was printed in 1991. Okay? And the earliest one, Kimka's book, on pages 311 to 313, is a statement. So, and then Kimka is just quoting Gunsch, who again gave his own in a letter from Gunsch to Kimka, allegedly dated from 1 July 1975, the year in which Kimka also, very conveniently also died. So the year that one of the sources that gives us a thing by another, so one source is giving us the letter from a person that is describing being on the scene at the time in the same year that he died 30 years after the fact. Very convenient. That's all we really have. These are books printed 30, 40, 50 years after the incident of people saying, oh yeah, here's how Hitler died. Right? And that's how we get the suicide story. What appears to have happened to me is that they did not recover Hitler's body, but the West, for various reasons, wanted to portray victory was over and done. They didn't need to do it anymore. And yes, Hitler's dead, even though the Soviets say he's not. And they actually said it was Soviet misinformation that he was still alive.
Interesting.
It was the exact words they use. Nothing is new under the sun. So if you really dig into the nitty-gritty details, and I won't bore you with them because it's like one of those things where they're like investigating a crime scene.
Yeah.
But a lot of it revolves around the discrepancies of what could have happened in this. Because Kimka, on page 93, for some reason, gives us a detailed sketch of the room in which the suicides occurred.
Okay.
That he says occurred. And when you look at the details of this room, are very important to understanding the discrepancies of like what they say happened and how it couldn't have happened that way. But I'll just give you some taste here. Here's the statement of Kimka. Towards midday on 30 April 1945, I was in damaged bathroom in subterranean garage. I had just come in from outside to oversee the change in shift. Half hour later, the phone rang. It was Gunch. It was Gunch boy. He said he had 200 liters of petrol. He wanted immediately at the entrance of a Führer bunker. I had to stand word on its head to get it. Sometimes my Nazi also sounds like a gay Nazi. I'm not sure why. I think it's because I watched Springtime for Hitler too much. Do you remember that?
That's funny. Yeah.
Remember that? Springtime for Hitler and Germany. It's a great movie. Mel Brooks is best. I said I would have to go underground for fuel store for that amount, and he suggested that he wait until 1700 hours, and suggested he wait till 1700 hours when the Russian artillery would be quieter. But Gunch said he had to have it now and hung up. So the idea is that you need 1700 liters of petrol, or how many? 200 liters of petrol to burn up Hitler's body.
Okay.
Right? So I ordered my assistants to siphon out what they could find in the vehicles in the garage bunker and hurried over the rubble to the Führer bunker to find out what was going on. I met Gunch in the annex of the Situation Room as he left the Führer suite and asked what was amiss. He said, "The chief is dead." Gunch gave me his story. He said that Bormann, Liege, and he, Gunch, had heard the shot and rushed in. They heard the shot, remember that, and rushed into the suite at once. The chief had shot himself in the head with a pistol and had inclined forward over the table top. Eva Hitler had taken poison and lay at an angle against the right arm of the sofa beside him. Her right arm hung over the sofa, and her revolver, elsewhere he says pistol, was on the floor near her. Dr. Stumpfeger certified her death. Goebbels and Axmann were also in attendance. Okay. So that's the statement of Kampfka. Again, made like 30, 40 years after the fact. Right? Statement of Lynch. Lynch says to him, he says, he's talking about he was talking with Hitler and they were having dinner. Immediately after this, Hitler and I went into the waiting room where Dr. Goebbels appeared and made an attempt to convince Hitler to leave Berlin. Hitler declined, shook Goebbels' hand, and then returned to the suite with me. Now came the last goodbyes with Flugkapitän Baer, Otto Gunch. Finally, Hitler gave a tired look and indicated that he was retiring for the last time. It was 15 hours. He told me, "Lynch, now I go to shoot myself." And he gave me instructions on how I was to break out of Berlin. Once he was inside, I shut the door behind him. I walked to the bunker exit where the SS bodyguard was sitting around, as I assumed that Hitler would very soon put an end to his life. I did not stay there long, but went back to the anteroom adjacent to the suite. There I smelt the smoke from a gun having be discharged. I did not feel I could face opening the suite door and going in alone, and he goes on to describe going in. But the point is, in his account, so in the first account, they all hear the gunshot and oh man, what happened? And they run in there. Second account, Hitler tells him, "Oh, listen," and these are the same people talking to each other. "I'm going to shoot myself." He goes away because he doesn't want to listen. Then later he comes back and smells the smoke of a gun and goes "Oh, okay, it's happened."
Oh, okay. Right? Yeah. Some pretty big
differences
there.
Big difference, right? And they also, I mean, I'm not sure how much this matters, but his descriptions of how Ava and Adolf are lying are different, right? And then he describes like carrying Adolf and Eva out, and Kimka says that she's surprisingly heavy. I'm not sure why he needed to do that dick at her on her last, but maybe he didn't like her. The statement of Gunsch says, about 9 in the morning, 30th of April 1945, I saw Martin Bormann, who was informing me that Hitler and his wife intended to commit suicide that day. The Fuhrer had ordered that their bodies be incinerated immediately after death, and I was to make arrangements. And we actually have a photo of Gunsch with Hitler from that fateful day. Allegedly.
Oh.
At least he was a man that was very close to Hitler, because he's in a photo like standing right next to him talking.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, good morning, Hitler. Do you need coffee? No, I need petrol. So a little later, I was summoned by the Führer. He repeated what Bormann had said, but made me responsible personally for the bodies of himself and his wife being burnt beyond recognition. After arranging all the available petrol supplies to be brought from the garage complex, I posted sentries of the Führer's SS bodyguard at the entrance of the anteroom. Only Goebbels, Bormann, Bergdorf, Krebs, Rattenhuber, Muck, Lynch, is a list of Nazi names, and myself had access to the anteroom immediately in front of the Führer's suite. Adolf Hitler and his wife took their leave of various close colleagues between 14:30 and 1500 hours, including Goebbels, Frau Goebbels, Bormann, and Bergdorf in a room adjacent to the anteroom, and they returned to the Führer's suite, and then he goes on to say, and they listened to him and everything. Okay. So, this statement, made in 1975, 30 years after the event, differs substantially from what Gunsch told Kimka immediately after the event. So Gunsch is giving us his statement later, 30 years after. But Kimka is saying this. What Kimka said, like, this is what he told me. Kimka, in a book like 40 years later, tells us that what Gunsch said immediately after, allegedly.
So Gunsch's story changed from we didn't have any knowledge of it, and then we heard the shot and investigated and found them dead, to they made a big deal of talking about they're going to kill themselves. They said goodbye to everybody. They made arrangements for the disposal of their bodies, etc. Okay.
Correct. And, okay, keep in mind, if the Nazis actually did what they're claiming happened, there would be no bodies anyway that was allegedly recovered by the Soviets, because they would have burned all up with 200 liters of petrol.
Okay.
Right, but yet somehow the Soviets later decided, we have a body. Got it? Okay, so here's the basics of the Gunsch reports. He posted sentries in the anteroom and heard the shot, and the other guy says we just smelled it, and that there was no bodyguard and all this stuff. So many inconsistencies in these stories these three sources give us. So, one of the shark hunters, Ivanheim, is his name, who he said he was actually, if you look at the credentials they give this man in this book, which seems somewhat legit, he was a spy during World War II. And Ivanheim said, in his opinion, these officers were either all stupid, or this is an SS charade which contains a message. And that message says, you cannot believe what we say about the suicide of Adolf Hitler and his wife. Right? Again, but a recurring theme on our show is it's bad on purpose.
Okay, yeah.
To get those that want to see through it to see through it.
Right.
Right? The official story, like if you look up on Wikipedia, it says Adolf Hitler died by gunshot. He committed suicide on 30th of April, 1945, in the Führer bunker, and Eva Braun, his wife, one day, committed suicide with him by taking cyanide poison. They have a nice big picture of the Stars and Stripes newspaper at the time. It says, Hitler dead! Right? Front page of the U.S. Armed Forces newspaper, Stars and Stripes, 2 May 1945. So you can see how that would be nice propaganda for the troops if he wasn't dead, to just put up there, Hitler dead. Right, it's over. We did it. Although records in the Soviet archives indicate that the burned remains, this is still from the Wikipedia article, of Hitler and Braun were recovered and interred in successive locations until 1946, and that they were then exhumed again and cremated in 1970. This has been shown to be entirely unlikely, since eyewitnesses testified there were no bodies per se remaining after the burning, just ashes. Okay, so that's important because in the Wikipedia article about their deaths, which is the normie version of what happened, they tell you that, well, the Soviets took the remains and then they buried them and reburied them, then they exhumed them and they cremated them and yada, yada, yada. And then they say, but this couldn't have happened. This is Russian disinformation because eyewitnesses said there were no bodies at all, just ashes.
Okay. Yep.
Right? But then they use to justify their story the idea that people went there and investigated the scene and said, oh yeah, he definitely was dead. Right? But there would be nothing but ashes. Yeah. And the only eyewitnesses that were there are these 3 ex-Nazis from 40 years later. It's all smoke and mirrors. Nothing is there. Right? So, concerning Hitler's cause of death, one non-eyewitness account claims he died by poison only. But eyewitnesses who saw Hitler, again, we just went through them, 3 SS guards, immediately after his suicide, and this is what the West relies on for its official history, is the 3 narratives of 3 ex-Nazis from 40 years after the fact. And that's where we get our official history about what happened to Hitler.
Okay.
Right? Gunsch, Hitler's personal adjudicant who handled both bodies, testified that while Braun smelled strongly of burnt almonds, indicating cyanide poisoning, there was no such odor about Hitler's body which smelled of gunpowder. And that...
Wait a minute. So is he saying exactly before they burned the bunker, he's smelling them? Okay.
Right. You wouldn't... I don't think that... Because she would be dead, right then, right? And your body wouldn't begin to smell of cyanide poisoning. But anyway, it goes on to say, listen, we know this happened because dental remains sifted from the soil in the garden were matched with Hitler's dental records in 1945. That's how we
already know you can't have reliable dental records without an intact jaw.
Right. And where did they get his teeth? They just were it was burned down and then basically bombed to hell. Right? Where are they getting these teeth? Just 5 seconds earlier, they said everything was just ashes and there were no remains. And they say, oh, but we found the teeth. In 2 paragraphs of the Wikipedia article. They're like, well, there were no remains, just ashes. That's why the Soviets could not have done their story. And we know there were no remains because we found the teeth. You see, in the just ashes.
Does it say who checked the teeth?
Yes. Let me see. It was this.
Well, if it was Americans, I would expect them to still have the teeth.
It was a British counterintelligence agent named Hugh Trevor Roper.
Okay.
Who had been sent by the head of the counterintelligence of Britain named Dick White.
Okay.
To investigate the matter and to counter. So in 1945, the Soviets were still going, Hitler's still alive. So the British counterintelligence sent a guy named Hugh Trevor Roper to Berlin to investigate the matter and to counter the Soviet claims. His findings that Hitler and Braun had died by suicide in Berlin were written in a report in 1946 and published in the book the next year. Regarding the case, Trevor Roper reflected, the desire to invent legends and fairy tales is greater than the love of truth. So here's the thing about this. So he had no access to any of the guys that told the story.
Right.
That we now rely on. They were not there. They had fled away. One of them, I think, was living in America at the time. One of these SS Nazis. So he goes to Berlin and is like, yeah, I'm going to investigate. But what did he do? There's just ashes, per their own story. The whole thing was bombed. If there were any remains, the Soviets claim to have taken them. And then the 3 people that give us the account aren't there. So how does Hugh Trevor Roper know anything? And he doesn't give any evidence. He just says, yeah. He says the desire to make up legends is greater than the love of what really happened. And what really happened is what we said. And that's all that. See, what I'm trying to. There's nothing. People have been lying since the dawn of time, for political purposes and to economic gain and all of the things, right? And to cover their own butts. In 1947, 51% of Americans polled thought Hitler was still alive.
Whoa.
In 1947, half of America, because people used to not be as dumb and just believe whatever the media said. Because, this is actually true. The media is bad now, or at least in the future, in 2021, right? The media is bad, no question. However, in World War II, it was arguably much worse, like way worse. In fact, during World War II, it was legal to punish a journalist by death if they countered the official narrative of the U.S. military regarding the war, because it was seen as hurting the war effort. So, if the U.S. government claimed something happened, and you were a journalist that thought it didn't, you may very well not say anything because you could be executed. Wow. So, and the American populace knew that at the time and was like, well, and that's going to get into a little bit later when we talk about what happened in Japan and why that didn't. Real quick, just to lead up to that, Japan surrenders in World War II, correct? Yes or yes?
Yes.
Right. Now, I want you to give me first the normie answer of why most people think they did, and then your answer. And maybe they're the same, and maybe the normie answer is right. I just want to know.
Normie answer being Japan was fiercely fighting until we nuked them twice, and then they decided that they did not want to fight anymore and surrendered.
Correct. And what is your answer?
My answer was that they were already pretty much wiped out as far as their military capacity goes. And lots of their major cities were firebombed already. And I think they were planning to surrender before the nukes went off.
Okay. Good answers. Then, I think that you're correct 100% on what the normie answer is about what happened and why Japan surrendered. Okay. So, then we spend a little bit of time in this book where he talks about his sources and the shark hunters, and the shark hunters very proudly talks about, with pictures of people in their uniforms, of everyone being like, here's our guy, we're calling him Don Angelo Alcazar, because he was from fascist Italy, and he joined as a new member in 1985, and look, here's a picture of him in his uniform where he was helping the U-boats. And all this stuff. And they've got a guy named Captain Robert Through, again, who is, they have the parentheses after him. Captain Robert Through, 333 through 1987. I don't know what that means. It's some sort of weird code. Or Peter Hansen, 251 through 1987. Robert Through is a retired full captain in naval intelligence and then spent many years afterwards in the NSA. German Abwehr agent Peter Hansen. He both personally knew Gross Admiral Karl Duntz and Admiral Wilhelm Canis, the German spy who was executed with a piano wire after the failed attempt on Hitler's life.
Whoa.
So these people really know a lot of what happened, right? Is what he's trying to convey to you. So, and some of these people are claiming to be the captains of U-boats. And it says, in the shark hunters, in the middle of the late 1980s, we were digging deeply into the rumors of the black boats, quote unquote. These were hidden spy I mean, they weren't really like hidden. They weren't like stealth or cloaked or anything. The German army was supposed to be gone and dead and conquered, but there were still boats in the sea that had not yet surrendered, which were ferrying Germans out of Europe and away to safety. Okay, these are the black boats. And this happened for some months after the surrender of the German military. So they were digging really deep into this in the 1980s, and we learned of a little town of Villa Garcia, which seems to be on the coast of Spain, 30 kilometers from the port city of Vigo. It was the main jumping off point from where, so they would go. This is why this lines up with Stalin said he's either in Spain or Argentina, because they would escape to Spain, go down, and then just ride a black boat all the way down, or maybe a plane to South America. And South America, being the escape for America's defeated enemies, has a long storied history. As we covered once before on the show, many Confederate generals who would have been like tried or executed after the Civil War just took their families and they went to South America and Brazil, and their descendants live there to this day. And they have a little town called Americana Town, where they do a country music Civil War cotillion every year. And in the same fashion, there are towns in Argentina now that speak majority German, and they have not been historically shy about their love of the Third Reich, including rebuilding Hitler's summer vacation home there in the Argentinian mountains.
That's great.
So, who knows, right? The existence of the black boats was confirmed also by two other shark hunter members. One was an officer and the other an enlisted man. Both served on the black boats that went to Argentina well after the reported suicide of Adolf Hitler in late April 1945 and the German surrender in May 1945. While we were asked not to reveal their names while they were living, they have departed and have moved on to their, quote, eternal patrol. We can report that they were Paul Bokschin and Karl Waldeck. So Bokschin, after he served on the black boats and possibly delivered Hitler to South America, to Argentina, he immigrated to the United States in the 1950s, where he lived a normal American lifestyle, got a job, worked hard, was married, and bought a house and lived his life as a normal family man who helped Hitler.
So I have a question. Is it accepted by normie historians that there was in fact an airlift of Nazis to Argentina? The only question in dispute is whether or not Hitler and other key figures were actually taken to Argentina.
Yes, it's very accepted that top, very high-ranking Nazis were ferried to.
Okay,
Argentina,
so that's all
where they lived out the rest of their life.
I guess the point is the infrastructure to make this happen is there and acknowledged.
100% there and acknowledged. The only thing is they say, but Hitler didn't go. But like very high-ranking people like Dr. Mendeleev went, and he just lived and was fine, even after he did all of his stuff.
Mengele or Mengele?
Mengele. I can never pronounce their name. I always say Mendeleev. Mengele. Yeah, I can never pronounce names that I just read. Yeah, Waldeck. And I'm probably butchering these German names in this book. But Waldeck and his wife, Annie, moved to England, where they managed large hotels for the rest of their life. And once they retired, they moved back to Austria until their death. And then he gives us some nice photos of Bakken standing on top of a U-boat. And Waldeck, being there, apparently in Argentina. So, their extensive research shows that at least 3 German U-boats were on the high seas operating as black boats in the Central Atlantic at the time of surrender and for some months after. First was a U-530, commanded by Shark Hunters member Otto Vermuth. So they have one of the members of these black boats on their team, which surrendered at the Argentinian Navy base in Mar del Plata in July 1945.
Okay.
More than 2 months after the surrender order was given. In August 1945, about 2 weeks later, a U-977 under command of Heinz Schaufer surrendered at the same submarine base, right? So they both surrender in Argentina, both commanders saying they had no knowledge of the other boat was at sea or that they were going to surrender at the very same far-flung South American port. So isn't that interesting that 2 of the last remaining U-boats who have been at sea both decided to surrender in Argentina.
Yeah.
At the same port. Right? When each skipper was asked, separately and in private, why they chose to surrender at this port in Argentina, the replies were the same. They said they wanted to surrender where they and their men would be treated with dignity. And each claimed they knew nothing of the boat's plans. And then he gives us a nice picture of Otto Vermuth, who's a very tall, strapping-looking German. He looks like your Nazi's Nazi. He's wearing in this photo, it's black and white, but he's standing on top of a U-boat, and he's got like that, like a knit cap on his head, sort of like a beanie. And then he's wearing a black leather trench coat with black gloves. It's a seaman's Nazi uniform, but I mean, he looks like the Russian dude that Rocky Balboa fought in the movie. Just a giant, So Otto Vermuth is a very poster child of Nazism. Now, here's the problem with that. According to the official logs on these books, the U-530 was a long-range type submarine, and it had the legs, quote-unquote, to reach Argentina. Right? But the 977 is a real enigma because according to their own reports and the logs that they kept, they departed their base in Norway with only 3/4 of a fuel load and went on their assigned patrol station off the British Isles. They then came to surrender on the other side of the world to Argentina. Right? However, even if that ship had a full load of fuel, it would have been very difficult to make it the 6,500 miles. It would have been maybe possible, but according to their own logs, they had a 3/4 of a tank and went somewhere else first. And there was no possible way that this thing could have made it there with that amount of fuel. And they questioned him about this. They said, this doesn't line up. And he said, I ran it, I ran one engine and I just did it at the surface. I didn't submerge, I just put it along here. But that actually, he points out, would use more fuel because there's more resistance when you're half in, half out of the water. Right? So it's really difficult. If he was where he said he was for those months, according to his logs, he could not have made it there. And so the only other option is that he wasn't where he said it was and they were doing some secret things that weren't on the logbooks. Take that for what you will. Both Vermuth and Schaefer claimed they had jettisoned all forms of paperwork at sea. All the other important paperwork, who was on there, they threw it away at sea. And however, former Abwehr agent Peter Hansen was brought to Buenos Aires in 1947 to translate all the papers that were, quote, not aboard these boats. So the official story from the Argentinian government is they didn't have many papers, but then they were actually brought someone in to translate the papers in 1947. And Harry Cooper, One Life 1983, was allowed through some means, I'm not sure how he gets access to this, but he claims he visited the submarine base at Mar de la Plata in 2008, and the boxes of papers were shown to him, and he took pictures of them, and they're here in the book. And there's some, it's just photos of files and little, he says it's nothing very interesting. It's just ship logs. But the point is they weren't supposed to be there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right? But what happened, so what happened is that these claims were sort of, these claims about the secret Nazis and stuff were sort of floating around for a while, but no one could really verify them. But then something interesting happened, and the Soviet Union completely collapsed. And when that happened, a bunch of archives previously behind the Iron Curtain were suddenly out in the open, and pieces began to fall into place. For instance, when that happened, we learned about a few Nazi secret bases, and that they were real. The Nazis did have secret bases. One was called Basis Nord, which means northern bases. And it was a base that on the very, very northern coast of Russia in the Arctic Sea that the Russians gave the Germans to use.
What?
Before they decided to be in a war, they gave them a base, and they lived there for a while. And it was a secret base that they didn't tell the British about because they said we're going to launch from here and attack the British from the north. And they'll never see it coming. And the Russian Soviets are like, yeah, that'd be good. Right? And then they were like, we actually don't like each other. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Okay. Now, not that I am against sneaking up on British people.
Okay.
If you ever do it in a store, it's hilarious. Because they'll go, if you're just in a grocery store in England and you sneak up on them, they go whoa, tea and crumpets! Like that. right? They're hilarious people. So I'm not opposed to that part of it. In fact, the United Operations that was short-lived between Germany and the Soviet Union was called Operation Barbarossa, right? It ceased to exist after they started shooting each other. But Führerland, I'm not saying that right, I'm sure, because it's not Führer like the Führer. It's like fire. The word fire in German is like Führer, something. Führerland. It means fire, land of fire. Something like that. Which in Spanish, translated, is now known as Tierra del Fuego. The land of fire. And it refers to the southernmost part of South America. In 1915, the German light cruiser Dresden made her way through the Straits of Magellan at the southern southern tip of South America, after the cruiser squadron Admiral Graf von Spee was wiped out in the Battle of the Falklands. He was given the job of looking for U-Platz, or hidden places. He was looking for hidden harbors in which ships could be safely anchored and not seen by enemy ships. And he made these maps and all these things. In 1938, the aging battleship Schleswig-Holstein, which is also a photo included below, retraced the route, making more detailed notes of where you could hide ships and ports and bases in South America and the coast of Argentina. Because Argentina has a very gnarled coast,
especially down south.
There's lots of little places you can put them in. These notes that we have, they are very detailed. They include things like hidden harbor points, proximity to the steamer lanes, to civilization, gave prevailing wind directions, bottom characteristics, how many ships could be in each harbor, maximum height of the mast to be concealed by the trees. They really went into detail, and he gives us in this book some of the maps that they've recovered, the shark hunters have from their records of these U-Plots, these hidden places in Argentina that were mapped out by the Germans. And they have all these interesting scribbles on them. It says, here's a good place to put boats, here's a good place for a port. This is from 1938 and 1915. And he published some. Apparently, they publish 10 times. The shark hunters publish a newsletter or a magazine called KBT Magazine 10 times every year. I need to get on this magazine. But he says some of these maps were first printed in our annual magazine, our annual pro-Nazi U-boat magazine. So we've established that the Germans did have official interest in Argentina and in hiding secret bases there, and that they could hide secret bases because they already did with Basis Nord. Right. Back to the Führer bunker. Okay. The only person of that inner circle that lived into the 21st century was Hitler's aide Otto Gunst. And we actually have a lovely picture of him in this book from the 1970s in color, where he's just sitting in a nice 1970s shirt. He's standing around going, it's all good. Me love the Beatles, or whatever. Which is hilarious to think of, because the first photo is him in his full Nazi regalia standing right next to Hitler in the Führer bunker, right? And the next photo, he's this old fat man in a 70s shirt going, yeah! That guy had a life, I mean, good or bad, good. I'm not making a statement on his morality, but he definitely lived a life. Did. Right? He helped Hitler commit suicide or escape, who knows? And then he was swinging with the Beatles, and then the guy lived a life. Okay, so but Gunsch, who supposedly poured gasoline on the bodies, that was the claim, he refused to talk about it for ages after, until 40 years when he gave that statement. This is one of the statements in this book that makes me think they're slightly Nazi sympathetic. When he said that, the author says, listen, Hitler was not a coward, and he did not believe in giving in, and he thought suicide was terrible. So, again, whoever these shark hunters are, they're slightly... Again, to anyone listening, not making any claims. We're not enemies here. His personal pilot. Now, here's an interesting bit. Hitler's personal pilot initially stated on May 1st, 1945, that he personally flew Hitler to an airfield in Norway where they transferred to another aircraft and flew onward. He later retracted this story and backed the suicide story. But German forces in Norway held out longer than German forces in Germany. So that would make a very convenient thing to have happened if he did escape. Like he says, listen, I did. He initially said, yeah, I flew Hitler to Norway, but he didn't die in the bunker. And Leon de Grael, a shark hunters member until his death, arrived in Norway aboard a minesweeper in Copenhagen at a similar time, and said that indeed that was a place where Nazi planes would land and take off. But he could not confirm whether Hitler was on one of them. Okay. But, again, we have a lot of circumstantial evidence is piling up that perhaps Hitler was not where they said he was. Again, the body was found by the Soviets, and the West was never allowed to inspect it. When they claimed there was a body, sometimes they said there wasn't. Sometimes they said there was, but it was ashes. And sometimes they said there was, but there remains, and you can't see it. So, who knows which of those stories to believe? And he makes the case that if there was a corpse, Stalin would have probably paraded it around and drunk wine out of his skull, because Stalin hated Hitler so much. The idea that he would not hang Hitler's body from like a puppet string and dance it around is somewhat unbelievable. Because he would do that sort of thing. Uncle Joe he had his fetishes. He's
kind of a brutal man.
Yeah. As our Uncle Joe does. Now. They each have their quirks.
Quirks. Yeah, quirks.
Who knows? So anyway, then we talked with shark hunter member Bob, who spent some time in the Naval Academy, and then after retirement went into the what they claim is America's most secret agency, the NSA, which at the time they said was, quote, no such agency. And this book was written, I should remind you, before parts of the book anyway, before they officially acknowledged that the NSA was real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
remember that?
I remember.
Before Edward Snowden, they didn't say it was real. And so he said he works for the NSA, what we call no such agency, jokingly. Bob stopped in for a visit in 1988, and we asked him if he'd ever heard of Don Angel Alcazar de Alfonso, like the guy that claimed that he was one of the guys that ferried Hitler over there. He smiled and confirmed Don Angel certainly was the spy he claimed to be. But then he said, but he was a bad spy. Everyone in the spook world knew he was a spy. Makes you a bad spy. I told Bob about the file Don Angel had sent to us about Hitler still being alive, and I said, this guy must be nuts. But Don Angel smiled and said that he said, I also know Hitler did not die.
Oh.
He said, Bob's reply, I was sitting on the sofa drinking tea or a cup of coffee, and he said, oh, we knew Hitler wasn't dead. I asked him what he meant. He said, oh, we knew. He said, the intelligence agencies, every time we tracked down a high-ranking party official, an SS officer, an Eyebwater agent, in the 40s or early 50s, the first thing we grilled them on is, where is Hitler? Where is Hitler? Right? But they just made up the story that Hitler died to wrap things up nice and neatly. Now, you might say, why would they do that? I'll tell you why they did that. Have you ever heard of a place, of a thing called Operation Paperclip?
Oh, yeah.
I know you have. Our listeners probably have too. And that was a thing where the American government, after the war, voluntarily entered into an agreement with the Nazis upon their surrender that they would not kill nor try ex-Nazi officials. And again, America's still one of the only places that doesn't do that. Like Italy and Germany, if they find out you were a Nazi official, they'll try you even now. But America doesn't, because we had an agreement that listen, it's fine. You come work for NASA most of the time. You come work in IBM. You come do some work for us. And we had something, the reports differ. It's anywhere between 2,000, 5,000, in some cases 10,000 German upper-ranking officers, engineers, and whatever were allowed to escape without persecution or prosecution in exchange for they would help us with their services. Is it possible that in that deal, one of the people negotiating that deal was Adolf Hitler, and he included himself in that deal?
I think it's possible. Yeah. I mean,
who else would they be talking to?
He was Mr. Nazi. I mean, you know.
Listen, I'll surrender, right? But we have to be given clemency, and this has to be arranged. And in exchange, and maybe that was done. And they knew the American public wouldn't like that, so they just said, "Yeah, he's dead," and his body burned up in a fire. But really, he's in. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about here's some well-known Nazis that definitely did escape to. And how did you say? I always say Mengele. How do you say the doctor's name? Joseph.
I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Right. Well-known Nazis that did 100% immigrate to Argentina. Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann.
Mm-hmm.
Adolf Eichmann. Everyone has heard of him. He was allowed to go to Argentina. Nazi doctors Joseph Mengele and Albert Heim. Commander Erich Pribik. Commandant Eduard Roschmann. General Lieutenant Ludolf von Alversperren. We need to have German names. Ludolf is a great name. But there's a nice article from 2017 where people were talking about this in the mirror.uk. The Argentinian towns where thousands of Nazis and their descendants escaped to, and their descendants now live. High-ranking Nazis such as Klaus Barbie, Adolf Eichmann, and possibly even Hitler fled to Argentina at the end of World War II. This quiet town alpine town in Argentina housed thousands of Nazis after the war. So they're claiming in the mirror.uk that at least 9,000 Nazi cronies fled to this alpine town in Argentina, where they continued to celebrate the Third Reich quite openly, even recreating the Führer's holiday home. They rebuilt the houses they built look very Germany, Germanesque, and it's continued to attract German immigrants over the years. So this article in 2017 was spurred on because Argentina police that week found a bunch of caches of swastika emblazoned artifacts.
Oh, okay.
And old Nazi memorabilia that people were keeping around. Right. And I assume that the guy doing that was not racist at all. Much like Father. Did you ever watch that show Father Ted?
No.
I don't assume that you did, because it's it's like the only Irish sitcom I've ever seen. Like, it was filmed in Ireland and it was about Irish. And the idea was, it was in the 90s, I think. The premise was, it was about this Catholic priest named Father Ted and his brother priest who was mentally challenged, who lived in a parish in rural Ireland, right? And they were like they were outsiders, and they'd come from the big city, and they were adjusting to rural farm life with these yokels, right? And my favorite episode was where he tries to deflect claims of racism all the time. And because he's pretending, he puts a little lampshade on his head and pulls his eyes out and he goes, "Look, Dugan, I'm Chinese." And just when he does that, he turns around. There's a Chinese family looking through the window of the parish. And he says, "What are the Chinese people here in Ireland?" He freaks out. "They're going to think I'm racist." And his brother priest, who's mentally challenged, has been taking holding World War II memorabilia from another friend who's a hobbyist collector while he goes on a trip. And so, like, when they finally come in and he gives this big speech about how he's not racist, he's explaining to the town, someone leans on this cabinet and it falls open and there's like a big Nazi flag. And all this stuff. It's a fantastic show. It was perfect, like 90s comedy. But that's what I think this guy was. The guy in Argentina just was probably a collector. Sure. I think that the fact that in Argentina was found between 10 and 12 giant caches of Nazi memorabilia does not mean anything at all. And we're jumping to conclusions. So when the Führer was defeated in 1945, according to this article, 9,000 Third Reich cronies and collaborators escaped to South America, as well as Argentina, where Bariloche became known as the Third Reich capital in exile. So, that's where they also flocked to Brazil, Chile, and Bolivia. Again, including Joseph Mengele, Auschwitz, Angel of Death, and Adolf Eichmann, the architect, the architect of the Holocaust. Oof. So the United States was like, yeah, listen, we know that Adolf Eichmann, the guy that we're very mad about the Holocaust. So mad. And yes, we know Adolf Eichmann is still living in Argentina. This is not current day, but like until the 80s. But we're not going to pursue anything. Because everything they say
Well, they did it for the science.
Right. The old Nazis there would celebrate, not so secretly, all the high days of Nazism there. Hitler's birthday, the founding of the Third Reich, numerous other anniversaries. So every year in this town, they would have a Hitler birthday party. That's how not Nazi it was. You see? And was Hitler, the question is, was Hitler the guest of honor in this town? It's beyond doubt that the South American town was a draw for Nazis. It boasted remote locations, corrupt leaders, and pioneering plastic surgery that could be used to change your features up a bit so that you weren't identifiable. It was great for these places. Other Nazis who went there included Erich Priebke, a Gestapo boss who became director of the town's German school. He and his wife held Nazi-themed evenings with dancing to old Third Reich tunes. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and got a life sentence in Rome, where he died in 2013. Now, not America. America doesn't prosecute Nazis because of Operation Paperclip. People went to these places. Not only did they build his vacation home, they also built Hitler's mountain home called the Berghof, and they recreated it up on a mountaintop, and they named the restaurant there the Berghof. The same name. They just gave it the name of Hitler's house. And that was the restaurant in town. So they weren't really this town was not, and the Argentinian government knew it was there. It was not. But as he points out in the book, this is understandable because he gives you some pictures of Nazi soldiers. Like, look at these Nazis, and they're wearing the helmets and they have the cars. He says, here's the thing though, these aren't Germans, these are Argentinians, because the Germans, for decades beforehand, gave all of their military equipment to the Argentinians for decades, and they trained them and everything. Wow. So there was a great deal of overlap, and in fact, you can't tell the difference in the photos between the two armies. Mm-hmm. Right? One Nazi that escaped there was named Paul Schaefer, a one-eyed Nazi soldier who became a pastor, who established Villa Bavaria, which was a pedophile's paradise, a la Jeffrey Epstein. In 2006, he was sentenced to 33 years for sexually abusing 25 children, and he died in 2010 at the age of 88. So there's a little bit of early Jeffrey Epstein going on here. Right? Yuki Goni, author of The Real Odessa, How Peron Brought the Nazi War Criminals to Argentina, said Argentina stands out as among the countries on the American continent that as the number one that the Nazis escaped to. The Nazis made a concentrated effort to rescue as many of their kind as possible and escape to Argentina, where President Juan Perón received them in the Argentinian equivalent of the U.S. White House. They were sent back to Europe with Argentinian passports en masse that were blank to be filled out upon arrival as a Nazi rescue mission that facilitated the arrival of the worst murderers of the 20th century. So, it was a coordinated effort by the Argentinian government. They gave them passports, said, fill them out when you get there, give these to whatever Nazis you can find, bring them over here, we'll be great, they can live in the town, and we'll all oom-pa-pa together.
Yeah.
Right? So, why wouldn't the West hide Hitler? Why wouldn't he be included in this?
Yeah, why would... Yeah.
Or, my friends, Or, my friends, do you imagine that the Nazis lost? Is that the impression you were under? Let me ask you something. You ever look at some of the corporate logos that you use? You ever look at them a little like maybe, I don't know, Sun Computer Systems? Or maybe the business software Slack? Or maybe Chase Bank? Do you ever see a little bit of swastikas
Really?
in there? Could it be?
What's up?
Could it be that in exchange for Nazi scientists and engineers, we agreed to let them live and cover for them? Could it be that these people that were at the heads of our scientific and cultural spheres have propagated their ideology? Could it be that is why our current political and corporate culture is filled with eugenicists?
Now, yeah. I mean, you can definitely see the philosophical legacy of Nazism in modern scientific community. I am a big proponent of that theory.
Oh,
I mean,
for sure.
Just the eugenics part of it alone, like abortion, experimenting human hybrids and all that stuff, that's all straight out of the Nazi philosophy of how to do science.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could make an argument that the Nazis were defeated, but then were subsumed into the liberal West. Hierarchy.
I mean, same argument that's made about the Soviet Union.
Correct. Yeah. Because what they did when they defeated the Soviet Union also is they took in a bunch of defectors and said, you can be in a high-ranking position of power.
That's how we got the Frankfurt
give us
School and critical race theory, and all that stuff comes out of the collapse of the Soviet Union and all these Soviet like philosophers and academics coming to America and setting up shop.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of that's been America's MO, really, is to beat someone and then take all of their leaders and give them positions of authority.
There's sort of like this
I don't know why, but that's what we do.
There's just like total moral relativism that just says, okay, well, when we defeat an enemy, we'll just absorb whatever skills and whoever their powerful people were, we'll incorporate them into our hierarchy and use their power. And there's no thought to who are these people we're bringing in and what are they like, you know?
Mm-hmm. I agree. Like Argentinian historian Abel Basti, he says he wrote a nice book where he published a whole hypothesis on this and how it happened called Hitler in Exile, in which he publishes some photos that appear to show Hitler at a fancy Buenos Aires restaurant dining with Argentinian officials. I mean, it looks like Hitler, but it's sort of at a distance, so you can't really say for sure. But he said that there was an agreement with the U.S. that Hitler would run away and shouldn't fall into the hands of the Soviet Union. Also applying to many scientists, military, and spies who later took part in the struggle against the Soviet regime. So what they did was like, listen, because you got to remember, so we finished the war in 1944, right? That's correct, right? Yeah. And then in 1947, the Cold War started. So what they were like is like, listen, you guys come over here and now you help us use your technology and all your Wunderweapons against the Russians. And they were like, yeah, okay. Like, come on, Werner von Braun, who was like a top Nazi.
Yeah.
Right? A very high-level Nazi. And like, you just be in charge of NASA. You know? You just be in charge of NASA, and that won't be anything shady at all.
Giving
come from
somebody
that.
a total makeover. That guy got the big makeover. I mean, just the fact that I mean, when we were coming up in school, you learned about the genius of Werner von Braun, and never was it discussed that he was a high-ranking Nazi. It's like, where did this guy come from?
They were never like,
oh, no,
listen.
he was just this guy, funny, smart guy with a German name.
Listen, he made a rocket ship. Can you make a rocket ship? No. So, are we really going to tit for tat the fact that he maybe did a little bit of genocide.
Oh, apparently it's not a big deal.
I mean, can you make a rocket ship?
If you're good at science, apparently that's not a big deal.
It's not a big... Listen, everyone, just like now, they're just harping on Ghislaine Maxwell and just attacking her. But have you made a media company? Have you become no, you don't know the hardships it involves. You know? And we're not going to cover her story just like we're not going to cover Werner von Braun's because you don't understand. We're going to really look at Kyle Rittenhouse, but no, there's not going to be any attention on Ghislaine Maxwell, really. We'll just ignore that. And we'll ignore Werner von Braun because you can't build a rocket ship. So Basti continues to say, he says, in my research, he said, wealthy families helped Hitler and the other Nazis over the years and were responsible for the organization of his funeral. Hitler was buried in 1973 in an underground bunker, which is now underneath an elegant hotel in the city of Auschwitz. I can't pronounce it. The entrance to the bunker was sealed. 40 people came to say goodbye. One of those who attended was Brazilian serviceman Fernando Noriega Ajuno. He then told the newspaper about the ceremony. Basti is not alone in this theory. A CIA operative of 21 years' experience, Bob Bader, and one of America's most elite intelligence officers, described something similar in a documentary series for the History Channel called Hunting Hitler, which aired in 2015. Bader claimed that he and his team discovered proof that Hitler had escaped, including 700 pages of declassified FBI documents, which they give photos of, these scans of these papers, which give a first-hand account of someone named Godano, who met Hitler and his party getting off the boat as they emerged from the submarines in Argentina, 2.5 weeks after the fall of Berlin. And these files were kept classified in FBI documents until recently, according to this fellow who worked for the CIA, who confirmably worked for the CIA, and came out and said, no, we have them. So, I think there's a lot of reason to suspect that perhaps Hitler did not die at the time they said he was. And in fact, an investigator from the FBI officially was asked about this in 1991, and he said, quote, American officials in Germany have never located Hitler's body, nor is there any reliable source that Hitler is dead. And there's not. There's just 3 SS Nazi stories from 30, 40 years later. Okay, my friends. All that being so, right? All that being so, is it possible that the thing you heard about the World War II on the other side is also false? That the way the war ended did not go as planned. It did not go as they said. Because like you said, most people think that we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that then they were like, oh man, they have nuclear bombs. We give up. But that isn't really what happened. And as I've said before, I don't think nuclear bombs exist. I don't think they do. And here's a question. Was Hiroshima and Nagasaki firebombed or were they nuked? And how would you tell the difference? So here's the thing. The wholesale destruction of Japanese cities mercilessly without regard to human life or women and children was standard U.S. practice. And they used firebombs, which were basically the fleets of planes would fly over and drop crazy amounts of napalm bombs on these cities, which were made of bamboo wood mostly, framed houses. And they burned like kindling, and miles and miles of city would just be burned down. And it was a practice that people did. And again, we were the good guys, don't worry. Yes, we set children on fire. But we were definitely way better than everybody else. Now, but here's an interesting thing. When you look at the photos of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and everything's rubble except the concrete frames of buildings which still stand. In fact, there's a photo from quote-unquote ground zero of 3 concrete buildings standing up completely. How did they survive being ground zero of a nuclear blast? At the time, Hiroshima was a wooden shanty town constructed in a very concentrated area. It was a sitting duck for a firebomb attack, if anyone ever was one. And then if you add a little atomic bomb psyop on top of it for effect, it would really have a big, you could really maybe get away with that. And one of the things, you remember how we did the show on 9/11 and we talked about how the people they interviewed after the fact had highly precise, detailed stories that were like, and it looked like it was structural damage from fire.
Yeah, I remember that.
Jet fuel. Same thing happened here. They interviewed people that came out that were there, eyewitnesses. Remember, the journalists who contradict the stories at the time, it's legal to kill them in America. Right? So testimonies that came out often also appeared scripted. And because they would describe things such as like, that sounded very similar to like a napalm burning, but then they would add things like, there was a strange yellow ray, or I saw a sun ray, or the yellow rays beamed down from the sky. And there's all these things that don't match what a nuclear bomb actually does. Like, there's no sun ray. It's a bright flash, like a huge flash. But here's the thing. They hadn't yet nailed down the lore of what a nuclear bomb was supposed to look like yet. And they were still hovering between like, okay, it's a big explosion. Is it like a space ray? Or is it like is it just like a heat? Like, how does it look? And they're like, I don't know. They tell them that they saw like sun rays come out of the sky, like, tell the, and they didn't mention a mushroom cloud either at the time, because that hadn't been part of the lore yet. The witnesses describe rather just like big plumes of smoke going up. There's no like mushroom cloud, right? And so they hadn't really hammered down what it looked like. And the descriptions of what a nuclear bomb happened aren't any different. Like what I mean is like they are, like I said, yellow sun, or I saw sun rays or yellow beams. Like, that's not part of what actually happens now. What we claim happens in a nuclear bomb. One eyewitness, Father John A. Simmons, who was a Catholic priest there at the time, said it was rumored that the enemy flyers had spread an explosive and incendiary material over the city, and then had created an explosion and ignition. A few maintained that they saw the plane drop a parachute which had carried something that exploded at a height of 1,000 feet. No one knew anything for certain of the nature of the bomb. So at the time, directly after, like in the first few days after Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, everyone said that it was lit on fire by some explosive, that they poured incendiary stuff over the town beforehand. So they came over and dusted the city, like crop dusting, with something that lit on fire, and then they lit it on fire, right? Which is what people said happened directly afterward, before the story of the nuclear bomb was introduced. And we have some nice photographs of the plumes of smoke coming up, and they look identical to any of the other Japanese fire bombings. There's no difference, at least from what you can see. U.S. Major Alexander P. Seversky, who in 1945 inspected the bombed towns of Japan. So 1945, U.S. Major Seversky went to Japan and inspected them, and he testified, quote, "In Hiroshima, I was prepared for a radically different sights, but to my surprise, Hiroshima looked exactly like all other burned out cities in Japan. There was the familiar pink blot, about 2 miles in diameter, dotted with charred trees and telephone poles. Only one of the city's 20 bridges was down. Hiroshima's cluster of modern buildings in the downtown section stood upright, the ones made of concrete. Quote, again, it was obvious that the blast could not have been so powerful as we had been led to believe. It was extensive rather than intensive. I heard of buildings instantly consumed by unprecedented heat. Yet here I saw the buildings structurally intact, and what is more, topped by undamaged flagpoles, lightning rods, painted railings, air raid precaution signs, and other comparatively fragile objects. At the T-bridge, the aiming point for the atomic bomb, I looked for the, quote, bald spot, where everything presumably had been vaporized in the twinkling of an eye. It wasn't there, or anywhere else. I could find no traces of unusual phenomena. So, the guy that was sent to inspect it directly after, his initial report said, I didn't see anything different from what the normal one did. And I remind you, nobody, one of the biggest red flags, is that Hiroshima and Nagasaki are fine. They're fine now. The whole mythos throughout the 80s and 70s, like, oh, it poisons the ground for 1,000,000 years.
Yeah.
They're fine. They're huge cities. They're metropolises.
They were rebuilt pretty quickly after.
Rebuilt very quickly afterwards. And in 1990, there was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. A 40-year study of thousands of Japanese survivors in Hiroshima and Nagasaki found radiation exposure caused no extra genetic damage to these patients. There was no increase in cancer rate, no increase in genetic defects, no increase in offspring genetic defects. They were fine. There was no evidence they had ever been exposed to high levels of radiation at all. An intense study of 70,000 offspring of atomic bomb survivors failed to identify any increase in congenital abnormalities, cancer, chromosome aberrations, or mutational blood protein changes. That's from John Boyce of the National Cancer Institute.
Wow.
So, not only that, but there was no medical evidence of it. And there's no geological evidence of it. Like, there's no, excess radiation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki now. It's fine. Thirdly, and perhaps the most thing that points to it being a piece of propaganda, is Japan. The atomic bombs, if they existed, had nothing to do with the surrender of Japan. That's complete propaganda to make us look like we were the ones that won the war instead of the Russians, who really won the war on every side. Because to the Japanese military, it didn't make much difference if people were dying from atomic bombs or conventional bombs. It's like, well, okay, you've been burning down cities already, though. Right? And now you just did it slightly faster. Wasn't a big deal, if that was the case. In fact, in the weeks prior to Hiroshima, 8 cities were attacked by the U.S. Army and were completely destroyed, or more completely destroyed than Hiroshima via just firebombs. During the summer of 1945, over 60 Japanese cities were mercilessly destroyed by terror bombing firebombs without regard to civilian life. Just completely burned to a crisp, right? And this did not cause Japan's surrender. Everyone in the Japanese government knew that the war could not go on. The question was whether to continue. It was not whether to continue, but how to bring the war to a close under the best terms possible. And at the time, the Soviet Union was still neutral in regards to Japan and America. Right? However, one day, the Soviet Union decided that it would declare war on Japan. The Soviet Union declared war, followed by the immediate invasion of Manchuria on the 9th of August, 1945, by about 100,000 Russians.
Wow.
And that is what prompted Japan's unconditional surrender, because they no longer had diplomacy to work out a good way of surrendering with, maybe we can play with the Russians. The Russians and the Americans decided, nope, we both want Japan's unconditional surrender. And the atomic bombs really did not much of nothing. It was the fact that 100,000 Russians were amassed in Manchuria, ready to come over right this second. And they said, okay, we give up. And that's how it happened. And the whole nuclear war bomb narrative thing is completely manufactured about what its effect was. And then we never blew up anymore. And neither did anybody else. All of the world leaders have such great restraint, and they've all been so good, that none of them have ever blown up. And why? Because of a very sane reason called mutually assured destruction, where we all have prevented nuclear war by amassing so many nuclear bombs that if we did use them, the whole planet would explode. And this is a true and compelling reason for why what we told you is real, and no nuclear bombs have ever been used in war since. Do you see?
Makes perfect sense.
And so, yes, I realize this is upsetting because what I'm trying to get you to believe is that not only was World War II fought on and ended on false pretenses, but the entirety of the Cold War was fought on false pretenses. There was never any, and both sides knew they didn't have nuclear bombs. But it was one side who had propaganda that we have the Wunderweapons, because the Germans did this all throughout the end of the war also. And then we took their scientists and they continued the same thing. Because they were like, the Germans were trying to scare off the Americans, saying they had a sun gun, which was they had put in orbit with their V-2 rockets a giant system of mirrors and magnifying glasses, which would concentrate the sun's light onto a specific point and burn up a city. And they're like, that's what we have. It's a Wunderweapon. And people were like, well, that's not too believable. What if we come up with something else? Like, okay, atomic bomb. Perfect. Now, it will never go off again. And it never will. You will never see one in your whole life. They stopped the testing of it. They stopped the... Anytime there's a test of it, like North Korea, I think sometimes North Korea just exists to propagate the nuclear bomb narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Because they could conquer that place no problem if they really wanted to. Right? But I think it just... Because they have like, they have a secret... we still test them, you see. It's just that they are underneath mountains.
Right.
And you cannot see them at all. And we just say anytime there's a natural earthquake that is an atomic bomb test. We are very smart. And, yeah, that's what's happening. There's no nuclear. The whole thing has been a ruse. It did not end how they...
The films of the tests that were done in the Pacific.
Yeah.
What are those then?
Oh, well, I would urge you guys to go back and watch those videos where you can find it. It's just like if you go back and watch all of the astronauts on the moon and how they just are hopping around on wires quite obviously.
Yeah.
If you actually look at these videos, many of them, first of all, like when they show the buildings fall over and stuff, they look like they're made of clay.
Okay.
Clay models. And all you have to do is just make an explosion in the ocean. Why is it you just put a bunch of regular explosives under the water and blow it up?
Well, and I think, the whole mushroom cloud thing is one thing people need to understand is you can have the same visible effects with thermobaric weapons as you supposedly can.
It's the same. It's just a pressure. Yeah. It's just a massive change in pressure differential.
Look up the Tsar Bomba. What year was the Tsar Bomba? I don't know. Was it in the 90s or something? 80s?
Yeah, and we did the same with our Mother of All Bombs Moab thing.
Yeah,
they both make mushroom clouds.
Really humongous thermobaric weapon, and it levels a large radius, at the blast site, and it sends up a huge mushroom cloud, just like you would expect a nuke to do.
Yeah,
so these effects can be had with quote unquote conventional weapons.
Yeah, the Tsar Bomba makes a mushroom cloud that looks just like it, and it's nothing unique about an atomic bomb makes a mushroom cloud. It's just you have a huge pressure differential that blows out the air in a radius, like poof, and then that creates a temporary vacuum that sucks everything back in, and that makes the dust go up in a mushroom.
Yeah,
and that's all that happens in a mushroom cloud, and no one ever had it. It never existed. There's no evidence now there's no physical evidence, there's no biological evidence, there's no historical evidence other than the accounts of journalists who were under threat of death that it happened. And the people in Japan at the time did not know they had been nuclear bombed for years afterwards until people were like, oh, that was a nuclear bomb. I'm like, huh? For real. They thought there was just normal firebombing like it happened everywhere else. And the testimonies at the time included things like, it was a yellow ray that came out of the sky. In Japanese. So I guess he'd be like,
right.
Wow, yellow ray came out of the sky. Oh, Godzilla. Like that, right?
Yeah.
Which is
very accurate portrayal.
It's very accurate. That's how Japanese people talk. My entire Japanese accent is based on watching Ninja Warrior.
I thought you were going to say Yukio Mishima.
That too, but no, not Yukio. The one that preceded Ninja Warrior, which was this weird Japanese game show where they would like make a lifelike video game out of foam and run around, and people dressed as trolls would chase them. It was great. But they would get so excited, like, oh, like that, and it was fantastic. And there'd be little captions at the bottom. That's just what I imagine them doing. But yeah, it's all been fake. Everything's been fake forever. Hitler lived for a long time, probably. Could it be? Allegedly. And the nuclear bombs were fake, and this Cold War was fought on false pretenses, and everything is just there to get you. Well, we've discussed why it's there. You understand why it's there. I hope by season 2 you understand more deeply.
I mean, I have come to see the Cold War as the Soviets and the Americans serving as each other's propaganda foils.
You perfectly put, because that is like. Well, they was under like that's what people were like. Well, if the moon landing was fake, the Russians would have called them on it. No, they wouldn't.
No, because they were cooperating.
Because the U.S. was also there because they're putting a dog in orbit was also fake.
Yeah,
and the Americans didn't call them out on it. Like it was all not. Yeah. The Russians couldn't do anything at the time. They could barely get a garbage can, into the sky.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, well, we did it. We put, we put a man around there, and we have Sputnik. And you see it fly over at nighttime, and you couldn't, of course, because Sputnik is about the size of a tin can. And it was flying, allegedly, at many tens of thousands of miles up in the sky and had like a little light bulb on it. There's no way you could see it blinking. But people said, oh, yeah, we saw it blinking. It's like, it's impossible. Physically impossible.
Yeah.
It had basically the battery power of like one AAA battery.
So, I mean, somebody probably was just flying an airplane over America with a light on it.
If they were even doing that, or they just found people to say it, and then people are like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
because people do that. People just lie. They'll tell you things that never happened. They will tell you other people's stories as if they're their own. They'll do that so often that they think it happened to them. People just are not the most trustworthy of animals.
But I mean, look at the two incredibly powerful empires that were built in the post-war era. Used each other as the propaganda villains so that the population would go along with a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Mean, it worked perfectly until the Soviet Union finally collapsed because communism doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I mean, China's technically communism.
No, they're not. I mean, they're not Marxist communism. They're just they're basically not very different from us anymore. Honestly,
we need to found a new school of Marxism.
Like we're not capitalists and they're not communists. We're both. So now China and the U.S. are now in this sort of a similar relationship that the U.S. and the Soviet Union was.
Yeah, very similar.
And neither country really honors its founding ideals or its stated purposes and all that stuff. Like all that's gone to the land of propaganda and rhetoric. Mm-hmm. And there's this. We're both products of like repeated Hegelian synthesis processes with our enemies.
Repeated Hegelian synthesis processes.
Yeah,
that's on a T-shirt right there.
Maybe that's a different
repeated
show,
Hegelian synthesis processes.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, just look at the scientific community in America is a result of absorbing first the scientific elite of the Nazi regime, who were very competent and impressive scientists. I mean, Germany was the scientific powerhouse of the world for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we did the same thing with the Soviets, and we absorbed them. And when you absorb the scientists and philosophers of your supposed enemy into your own hierarchy, your hierarchy adopts the qualities of what it's absorbed. I mean, it's just
that's why America's become like communo-fascist in ideology, where it's like it's communism plus eugenics plus racism.
Right.
It's like the worst. Like what if we did the worst of all of it?
Yeah.
And did that, and they were like, "Yeah, that sounds good."
Right. And then you throw in like the moral relativism that gives way to nihilism. You throw that in there, and you end up with a system of anarcho tyranny, which is basically what we're spiraling into now.
Which is what we're fighting against.
Yeah.
What we are is leading the charge to freedom.
Right. Yeah.
Against. Last question.
Yeah.
If you had to live in one or the other, would you have enjoyed living in a fascist country or a communist country?
Fascist countries had way better aesthetics.
See, I think that's true in part, but toward the end, the Russians really had nice, like they had all those nice marches and killer statues. I mean, great statues.
I saw a video. There's a friend of mine has this photo book of Soviet architecture, and I was flipping through the other day, and I was stunned because it wasn't. We think of Soviet architecture as brutalist.
Right.
And they did do some brutalism, but they built some beautiful stuff. Some really beautiful stuff in the Soviet Union. And then I look around at the cities that we were building, and we built as much or more like alienating brutalist architecture than the Soviets did. That was the weird thing that really struck out.
Yeah, it's all backwards.
So now I don't know,
None of it's how they said. It's all like, right. They're building brutalist stuff, but really we're doing it, And they did do some brutalist stuff. But like the building of Moscow State University was built under Stalin, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a very classical style building. It's so, I don't know. When we figure out our new system of Marxism, we'll come up with it. Architecture will be key.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should make someone the czar of neo-Marxism. Who should that be? Which of our listeners?
I don't know.
Who's the best at?
Who's the most continental? Probably Duke of Alba.
Yeah, but see, I don't know if he wants to be a czar.
Yeah.
I think he's more of an academic type of person. I think his personality is more like he likes to study and write papers and stuff. I don't know if he wants to head a committee, really.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe okay. How about we make C.C. Seeker the czar of neo-Marxist ideology?
Boom.
You have to come up with it, and we will propagate it in the university system.
Right.
And in 50 years, it will start to pay off. You got to think long term.
It has to actually be sort of fascist.
Yeah, well, or, I don't even think you should be in the bounds of those. Just make up something totally new and just call it that.
Right. I guess my point is don't feel like you're really bound by the definition or the name.
It can be, Maybe it can be a little bit of a Greenpeace movement in there, too.
Yeah. Just
kind of go environmentalism. Wild. Maybe it's focused on things maybe it's about water purity.
Yeah.
Like imagine an ideology centered around the idea that water is impure and that's causing all people's illnesses and discontent in society.
Yeah.
You could totally do that.
You could.
Jawohl! Oh, they're back. Quick, go under the blanket.
Targets up here, we just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast that went right over the top of us.